The human they captured wasn't ordinary. The jungle of Valar Prime was thick with heat and silence. Birds didn't sing here. Nothing moved unless it wanted to kill. That's why when the patrol team from the Valari warrior clan found a broken escape pod burning in the mud, they didn't expect to find anything alive. But something inside was still breathing. 2 Amazon scouts stepped closer. Tall, alien women with bronze skin, glowing eyes, and armor carved like stone. They aimed their spears carefully as the pod door creaked open. A hand reached out. Not claws, not tentacles, a human hand, covered in blood, shaking, but strong. Then a voice. Low, rough, but alive. Don't shoot. The Amazons froze. They had never seen a human in person. Not here, not on Valar Prime, and certainly not one who looked like him. His name was John Mercer. He had served in Earth's recon fleet, special forces, lost in a battle no one survived. Until now, the warriors dragged him from the wreckage and stared at him. He was smaller than them, but his body was dense with muscle. His skin was marked with scars, each one earned, not given. His eyes, green, focused, met theirs without fear. Most males they had seen begged. This one didn't. He passed out before he could say more. When he woke up, he was inside a glowing chamber. Warm air filled the room. Strange lights danced across the ceiling. His hands were tied, and 6 alien women stood around him, watching, studying, measuring. The tallest among them stepped forward. She had silver tattoos across her face and a blade strapped across her back. Her voice was deep, clear, and carried command. You are not native to Valar Prime. No kidding, John muttered. You survived the crash, alone. He nodded. I guess that's impressive around here. It is, she said. You are the first human male ever found on this planet, and you did not die. Not yet. She turned to the others. He is suitable for testing. That word, testing, woke John up fast. Hold on, he said. What kind of testing are we talking about? The silver-tattooed warrior turned. Your species is rare, but your biology is unique. Your blood survived high-pressure impact. Your bones have healed in hours. Your scent has already triggered reactions among the warrior caste. Excuse me? You have been chosen for the breeding evaluation. John blinked. Breeding? Me? I think you've got the wrong guy. The leader raised a brow. Do you refuse? I don't even know what that means. She stepped closer. In our world, males are chosen for their genetics. The strongest breed, the weak serve. You are the first human male ever discovered here. You will face trials. If you pass, you may be claimed. John sat back against the stone wall. This wasn't a prison. It was a testing ground, and he was the prize. That night, he didn't sleep. Guards stood outside his chamber, warrior women, silent and still. He could hear the sounds of training, metal, hitting metal, war cries, footsteps like thunder. These were not ordinary alien females. These were Amazons, tall, powerful, proud, and they had decided he was worthy of their attention. John didn't know if that was good or bad. He only knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to play their game. Not yet. But deep inside him, something stirred. A soldier's instinct. Strange sense that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was something bigger, something no human had ever faced. And the question wasn't whether he could survive the trials. It was whether he could survive being wanted. They tested his blood. Then their queen summoned him. John sat on the edge of the stone bed, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been. They had untied him. Not because they trusted him, but because they had finished testing. He'd been poked, scanned again. Machines hovered around him, pulling data from every cell in his body. Strange glowing fluids were drawn from his arm. One tube turned gold. Another started to hum. The Valari Amazons said nothing during the process, but they watched him, not like a lab rat, more like a prize, or a weapon they didn't know how to use yet. At sunset, the same silver-tattooed warrior returned. This time, she didn't come with guards. Only a single golden ribbon in her hand. "You will come with me," she said. John looked up. "Where? Are we going now, another scan?" "No," she said. "You have been summoned." He stood slowly. "By who?" She gave a rare smile. "Our queen." The walk through the Valari capital was strange and quiet. Tall stone towers twisted toward the sky. Floating lights hung like lanterns in midair. Warrior women moved along the pathways, all tall, armored, and fierce. But every one of them stopped. When they saw John, some stared, some smirked, some whispered. He felt like a walking rumor. Finally, they reached a wide staircase guarded by armored females with spears made of glowing metal. At the top stood two enormous golden doors, each carved with images of past trials, fights, births, deaths, and one image that made John pause. A human, or something that looked like a human, kneeling before a queen. "Is that supposed to be me?" he asked. "No," the warrior said. "That was the last outsider chosen." He turned. "What happened to him?" She looked him in the eyes. He ran. Then she pushed the doors open. The throne room was unlike anything John had seen. It wasn't just a room. It was a mountain carved from within. Massive columns stretched into the air, wrapped in vines that glowed blue. A clear river flowed through the floor. Music played from unseen sources, deep drums and soft whispers. And at the Yandam far end, on a throne made of crystal and light, sat her. The queen. She was the tallest woman he had seen yet. Her skin shimmered like obsidian touched by moonlight. Her eyes were silver and deep. Her armor was made of woven energy. No crown, just presence. The room bowed as she stood. John stayed, standing. He didn't bow. He didn't move. He just looked at her. And she smiled. "So," she said, voice smooth like water. "This is the human with the impossible blood." John said nothing. "You are smaller than I expected." He raised an eyebrow. "You're taller than I expected." A quiet chuckle moved through the guards. The queen stepped down from her throne. Her eyes never left his. "You survived our gravity, our heat, our jungle. You healed faster than any male we've captured." "Captured?" he asked. She circled him slowly. "Studied, rescued, collected. It depends who you ask." He clenched his jaw. "I'm not a thing." "No," she agreed. "You are an answer." "To what?" "To us." She walked to the river in the center of the room and dipped her fingers in. "Our people are strong," she said, "but not evolving. Our bloodlines grow, tired, predictable. The old ways are dying." She turned to him. "And then you fall, from the sky." She held out her hand. He didn't take it. Instead, he asked, "Why me?" She answered with a single word. "Because your DNA sings." John blinked. "Excuse me?" "Our science speaks through sound," she said. "When your flood was tested, it created tones we've never heard. Harmony, strength, renewal." She stepped closer. "You are not just human. You are the strongest possibility we've seen in centuries." John took a step back. "So what now? You want me to be some kind of royal breeding bull?" Another chuckle from the shadows. The queen smiled. "You have a choice, John Mercer. That's the first difference between you and the others." He narrowed his eyes. "And if I say no? Then we erase your records, your name vanishes, and your blood, your genes, are lost forever." John looked around the chamber, the guards, the murals, the river, the queen. He took a breath. "I want something first." She raised an eyebrow. "You dare to bargain?" "I dare to ask." "Then ask." John pointed toward the windows. I want to see your world, not just your throne. I want to meet the ones who aren't warriors, the ones who never get to choose. The queen stared at him for a long time, then she nodded once. You are more dangerous than I expected. And just like that, the human who was supposed to be a silent subject became the first male allowed to walk free through Valari territory, not as a prisoner, not as a breeder, but as something new, a possibility. The warrior women challenged him and lost. The sun over Valar Prime was hotter than Earth's. The skies were green. The clouds moved slowly. The air was dry and sharp, like fire and wind dancing together. John stood barefoot in the trial circle, a wide stone arena carved into the top of a mountain. Around him stood hundreds of Valari warriors, tall, powerful women wearing shining armor, their eyes glowing with pride. Most of them didn't believe in him. Some wanted to test him. A few wanted to break him, and that's why he was here. The queen sat high above, watching from a platform of gold and vines. Alari, now a whisper among warriors, stood behind her, quiet, calm, watching John like he was more than a man, like he was already changing everything. A horn blew. The first challenger stepped into the ring. Her name was Varrica, a veteran warrior with a scar across her lip and arms that could bend steel. She pointed at John. I will not kill you, she said, but I will show them you don't belong here. John didn't answer. He just stepped forward and smiled. The fight began. Varrica struck first, fast and clean, a sweep of her leg, then a hard swing from a training staff. John dodged, barely. He wasn't stronger, he wasn't faster, but he was smarter. He waited, watched, moved in angles she didn't expect. She attacked with force. He responded with balance. She tried to dominate. He refused to play. 10 minutes in, she was breathing hard. He wasn't. Another swing. John caught her arm, pivoted, and flipped her to the ground with a move he learned in Earth-close combat training. She hit the stone. Hard. The arena gasped. He stepped back, offered a hand. She looked at it for a second, then took it and bowed. The next challenger didn't wait. She ran into the circle without being called. Younger, wilder, furious. You tricked her, she shouted. Try me next. John didn't argue. The horn blew again. This time she used speed, spins, twists. Shadow moves. John didn't block everything. He took hits, but every time he fell, he stood up again, not angry, not hurt, just focused, until he saw her rhythm. Then he moved close, too close for her to swing, and whispered, You're good. She froze. A pause. He tapped her on the shoulder. She blinked and dropped her staff. The queen leaned forward in her seat. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was studying, because something strange was happening. John wasn't winning with force. He was winning with presence. 4 more warriors entered. 4 more, but not through pain, through respect. He read their moves, their timing, their emotion. He saw what they needed, not defeat, but to be seen, and that's what he gave them. When the last warrior stepped out, the queen rose. The trials are complete, she said. You were not expected to last. John wiped sweat from his brow. I wasn't expecting any of this either. You did not crush them, she said. No, but they bowed. He nodded. They did. The queen narrowed her eyes. You confuse them. You confuse me. Good, John said. Maybe that's what your world needs. That night, the city streets were different. Warriors who once ignored him now nodded. Guards opened doors before he arrived, and whispers followed him like smoke. He didn't break anyone. He made Varrica respect him. He's not just strong. He's aware. In the quiet gardens of the palace, Alari waited for him. She offered a drink made from blue fruit and glowing herbs. He sat beside her. You watched? He asked. She nodded. I thought they would hate you. They still might. No, she said. They fear you, but it's different now. She looked into his eyes. You didn't defeat them. You disarmed them. John looked up at the stars. Sometimes, he said, the best way to win is to make people put their weapons down. In the far chambers of the Queen's Tower, older counselors whispered in hushed voices. His methods are too soft. He changes the rituals. He speaks of choice. But the Queen said only one thing. He passed. And he did it his way. He entered the chamber, but chose only one. At sunrise, the palace bells rang. It was not the sound of war. It was the call to selection, a ritual older than the Queen herself. A tradition so sacred that even the warriors bowed their heads as it began. This was the choosing day, and for the first time in Valari history, the one doing the choosing was a human. John stood at the entrance of the conception hall wearing a simple black robe. He was cleaned, fed, and glowing with energy from the trials. But his face was serious, his mind heavy. 2 guards flanked him, but not to keep him in. They were ceremonial now. He was not a prisoner. He was the one every woman inside had trained a lifetime to stand before. The Queen's voice echoed through the hall. John Mercer of Earth, you have passed the physical trials, the challenge of mind, and the rite of presence. You now enter the sacred hall to make your selection. John nodded, but said nothing. The doors opened. Inside, the chamber glowed with soft purple light. Tall pillars lined the walls. Scented smoke rose from crystal bowls. A fountain sang in the center, calming and strange, and around it stood 24 Valari females. They were tall, perfect, powerful. Each wore ceremonial armor, chest plates etched. With honor markings, they were the best, the elite, the chosen. Each one had trained for this moment, and each expected to be picked. John walked in slowly. All eyes followed him. No one moved. He didn't smile. He didn't rush. He looked each woman in the eye. Some held his gaze boldly. Some looked away, pretending not to care. One even smirked, confident she'd already won. He passed them all and kept walking, to the very back of the hall, where someone stood alone, not armored, not tall, not elite. She was quiet, slim, still, wearing a plain robe with no markings. No one had noticed her until John stopped in front of her. She didn't look up. Her head was bowed. She wasn't supposed to be in the room at all. It was Valari. A few gasps echoed in the chamber. One of the elite stepped forward. She is not on the list, another spoke up. She has no blood title. A third, louder. She didn't even compete. John turned to them. I know. The Queen entered the chamber. She looked down at him from her balcony. John, she said carefully, the ritual requires selection from the council-approved cast. I've made my choice, he said calmly. The Queen's eyes narrowed. You reject? All 24, I do. He looked back at Alari. I choose the one who never asked to be chosen. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The Queen stepped forward. You understand what this means? I do. Then say it aloud. John looked up at her and said, I choose not a warrior, but a witness. Not a perfect body, but a perfect soul. I choose her. Alari finally looked at him, and tears shimmered in her golden eyes. For the first time in Valari history, a selection was made against royal protocol, and not for power, not for dominance, but for connection. Some called it rebellion. Some called it weakness, but others quietly whispered, maybe it's evolution. That night, the Queen met with her council. Old warriors slammed fists on tables. He broke the right. He humiliated our best. He picked a scribe over a soldier. But the Queen stood calmly and said, he didn't come here to follow our laws. He came here to show us why we need new ones. Back in the quiet chamber, Alari sat with John beside the glowing pool. No crown, no armor, no rules between them. I'm not worthy, she whispered. You are, he said, because you saw me before they did. She touched his hand, softly. What happens now? She asked. John looked at her and smiled. We don't follow their path. We make a new one. Another tribe attacked, and he fought like no male ever had. The moon hung low over Valar Prime. The jungle slept, but not for long. In the dark, far beyond the palace walls, shadows moved. Dozens, then hundreds, armored, armed, fast, not Valari, not welcome. They came without sound. No horns, no banners, just silence and speed. They were from the Jiran clan, a rogue matriarchal tribe that lived on the scorched side of the planet, known for breaking treaties, known for taking what they wanted, and tonight, they came for him. Inside the palace, John sat with Alari on a balcony. They shared a drink made from soft blue fruit. Her laughter was light, his smile, real. It was the first moment of peace he'd had since the crash. I never thought I'd feel calm here, he said. I never thought I'd feel chosen, she replied. Then, a sound, low, distant, wrong. A sharp horn tore through the air. An alarm. The sky turned red. And everything changed. The queen appeared in the war hall, armored in full black and gold. We are under attack, she said, her voice like fire. They come for the human. They come to erase what he represents. John entered the room before she finished speaking. I'm not hiding. One of the guards stepped forward. You are not trained for Valari combat. He looked her in the eye. I don't care. Alari tried to speak, but he held her hand. They're not just coming for me, he said. They're coming for what we've built. He put on borrowed armor, lighter than the others, tight across the chest, flexible around the arms. He picked up a staff, then a blade, and stepped out into the courtyard. Rain began to fall, glowing, like it always did on Valar Prime, and the warriors lined up, dozens of them, ready to defend their home. But none of them stood in front of John. They stood beside him. The Jaran invaders came in waves, silent, swift, brutal. John fought like he had on Earth. But here, the stakes were different. There were no medals, no commands, only her. He moved through the chaos with clarity. A warrior rushed him. He ducked, swept the leg, disarmed, moved on. Another tried to strike from behind. He caught her arm, rolled forward, flipped her over. He wasn't the strongest, but he was the most unpredictable. From the tower, Alari watched in silence. The council gathered behind her, stunned. He's leading them, one whispered. Not with words, another said, with movement. The queen narrowed her eyes. He fights like no male we've ever seen. And then, she smiled, not for war, but for change. John found himself surrounded. 4 Jiran warriors closed in. His chest burned. His legs ached. He had no backup, no plan, just breath and memory. He thought of Alari's voice. He thought of the first time she said his name, and then he roared, not in anger, but in refusal. Refusal to be a symbol. Refusal to be stolen. Refusal to be anything but his own man. He moved fast, ducked the first, punched the second, rolled over the third, caught the fourth's blade, and snapped it in two. The crowd of Valari warriors saw it. The tide changed. The Jaran broke formation and retreated. When the smoke cleared, the courtyard was silent. John stood in the rain, breathing hard, his armor cracked, his hands shaking, but he was still standing. The queen approached. You disobeyed protocol. I saved lives. You put yourself at risk. I chose to fight. She stared at him for a long time, then nodded and turned to the court. This male, she said, was not trained by us, not raised by us, but he stood when others might run. She looked at her guards. At this moment, he has no equal. That night, Alari came to his chamber. His hands were bandaged, His lip split, but his eyes still burned. She sat beside him. "You didn't have to fight," she whispered. He touched her hand. "I know." "Then why did you?" He looked into her eyes and answered, simple and honest, "Because they came for you too." He was offered the throne, but made his own rules. The war horns had gone silent. Velar Prime was healing. The broken gates were repaired. The burned banners replaced. The scars across the city walls were now reminders, not of loss but of survival. And at the center of it all stood John Mercer, the human who had fought not to lead, but to protect. In the grand assembly hall, the Queen rose from her seat. Behind her, a new banner hung, the symbol of unity. Two hands, one large and human, one Velari, pressed together under a rising sun. She turned to the court. Today, tradition changes. Whispers passed between the nobles. They knew what she was about to do, but they couldn't believe it. She looked at John. "You saved this world," she said. "You stood for its people, not its laws. And now I offer you a role that has never been given to any male, not even Velari born." She stepped forward and held out a silver crown, glowing at the edges. "Will you take your place as consort commander, leader beside the queen?" The room froze. Even Alari, standing in the shadows, held her breath. But John didn't answer right away. He looked at the crown, then at the queen, then at the hundreds of faces watching him, and finally, at Alari. He stepped forward, took the crown, held it in both hands, and gently placed it on the ceremonial table, not on his head. Gasps rippled through the court. The queen tilted her head. "You refuse?" John shook his head. "No. I accept the responsibility." "Then why not? The crown?" "Because if I wear it," he said, "I become part of a system I want to change." He turned to the crowd. "Let me speak, not as your ruler, but as your equal." He stepped into the center of the hall. No title, no throne, just truth. "You call me strong because I survived," he said. "You call me worthy because I fought, but strength without freedom is still a cage." He paused. "And for too long this world has told its females who to be, what to become, who to breed with, when to kneel, when to rise." He looked at the queen. "I won't lead a kingdom of control." He looked at Alari. "I want to build a world of choice." The court was silent. Some were shocked, some angry, but others moved. The queen stepped down from her dais. She stood beside John, not behind him, not above him, beside. She raised her hand. "Then we begin a new tradition," she said. "One where choice is law, where rank does not decide love, where strength includes mercy." She turned to her council. "Let it be written, all Velari, noble or common, warrior or scholar, have the right to choose their path." Alari stepped forward. For the first time she did not wear her scribe's robes. She wore a garment of her own design, simple, beautiful, hers. She stood beside John and reached for his hand. He took it. And in that moment, nothing needed to be said. Later that night, as stars blinked quietly above the garden, John sat with the queen and Alari beside a glowing pool. "Do you regret not taking the crown?" the queen asked. John shook his head. "No. Power should never come from metal." She smiled. "Then you're already wiser than most who wear it." From across the galaxy, messages poured in. Allies, former enemies, other tribes, other species. They wanted to know more about the human who had refused the crown and changed the laws with words, not war. And somewhere on a forgotten moon, a young girl whispered to her mother, "Is it true a human changed the queen's law?" Her mother smiled and said he didn't change it. He reminded them it could. He wasn't born Velari, but they called him one of their own. The skies over Velar Prime glowed a soft violet as dawn rose behind the cliffs. It was a day like no other, not because of war, not because of trials, but because the Velari had come together to witness peace. In the great stone plaza of the capital, thousands gathered, warriors, scribes, elders, and even children. They wore robes of every color, and for the first time in generations, there were no ranks, no special thrones, no separating walls, just people, together, waiting. At the heart of the plaza stood John Mercer, the human who had arrived as a stranger, and now stood before them not as king, not as consort, but simply as John. He wore no crown, no armor, just a dark tunic stitched by a Lari, with symbols from both Earth and Valar Prime woven along the edge. One side held the emblem of Earth Recon, the other the mark of the Valari flame. On his chest he wore a single pin, a silver spiral, the ancient symbol for found family. The queen stepped forward first. Today even she did not wear her war crown. "I have ruled for 30 cycles," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I have passed judgment, chosen champions, and fought beside giants." She looked at John. "But never have I learned more from one being than I have from this human." She turned to the crowd. "He taught us that the strongest hand is not the one that strikes, but the one that reaches out." The people listened, some with wet eyes, some with quiet awe, because they remembered what he did, how he stood in front of the invaders, how he fought without fear, how he refused to be their ruler, so he could be their equal. Then Alari came forward. She did not read from scrolls. She didn't bring ancient laws. She brought her heart. "He came from a broken ship," she said, "but he built something whole." She touched John's shoulder. "He wasn't born Valari. He doesn't speak all our words. He doesn't look like us. But when we were afraid, he stayed. When we pushed, he listened. When we broke, he helped rebuild." She stepped back and looked to the crowd, and when the time came to choose us, he did. The moment hung in the air like a slow sunrise. Then, one by one, the Valari began to chant, softly at first, then louder. "Valari, Valari, Valari." John looked up and saw something he never thought he'd see. They were calling him one of them. A warrior stepped forward and handed him a ceremonial staff, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. "Not a ruler," she said, "but a voice." A child brought him a glowing leaf. "For protection," the child said, "like you protected us." An elder approached and offered a small stone. "Place this in the Hall of Ancients," she said, "so your story never fades." John looked at the people. He wasn't their king. He wasn't their god. But he was theirs. Not by blood, but by bond. Later that night, in the quiet of the garden, Alari sat with him beside the blue-lit pond. The stars shimmered above them. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I used to," he said, "but Earth didn't see me." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And we did?" He smiled. "You saw who I was before I did." A small chirping sound interrupted the silence. From the path a nurse stepped forward, holding a bundle wrapped in glowing cloth. Alari stood and took the bundle into her arms. Inside was a child. Small, quiet, eyes like hers, but skin like his. Soft human features, with faint glowing lines beneath the surface. The first child of two worlds. John looked at his daughter and whispered, "She'll be more than either of us." Alari nodded. "She'll be the bridge." And as the baby opened her eyes for the first time, the stars above Valar Prime blinked brighter, as if the galaxy itself had taken notice. He didn't conquer. He didn't demand. He didn't rule. He loved, he stayed, he listened, and in return they called him one of their own.